Welcome Bronco Nation to my game review for Boise State versus Nevada. Now, I'm not in my normal studio space. I'm at my in-laws' house, and this game just finished up after 1 a.m. because I'm on Central Time Zone. So I'm going to be talking in a little bit more of a muted voice than I normally do because I really don't want to wake everyone else who's gone to bed up. But we're still going to discuss the offense, the defense, the special teams, go through everything that Boise State did in this game, give a grade to each of those units, and then we'll also talk about the 3 keys to the game for Boise State that I presented in my preview video and how Boise State accomplished them in this game. So obviously Boise State winning this matchup versus Nevada, a rivalry game, a huge win, the biggest win by Boise State versus Nevada since 2006, or at least at Reno since 2006. Boise State winning this game 41-3, a massive defeat here by Boise State. And I will mention, even though I am at my in-laws' house, I still have my turf with me at all times. But getting back to the video here, Boise State massive defeat here against Nevada after coming off of a loss, a tough last-second loss to BYU last week. Boise State coming in with a vengeance here versus Nevada and getting the win on the road to improve to 6-0 now in the Mountain West, and a chance here, a really good chance with Wyoming and Utah State coming up to finish the season undefeated in conference play. Now, it was rough weather tonight. That definitely, though, didn't slow Boise State down because they put up 520 yards of offense in this game, a very balanced performance, 261 yards passing, 267 yards rushing. I'm going to grade right off the bat here with a solid A here overall. Not an A plus because I think there were some opportunities that Boise State gave up, especially when they got inside the red zone. Multiple failed conversions inside the red zone for converting points, period, because you had 2 muffed field goals. But you also just had Boise State coming up short in the red zone, which they've struggled with all year long. This is not just this game situation. Boise State has struggled this year to actually convert their drives once they get close to the red zone. But Boise State really struggling in this game to put a lot of these drives away. This score could have been, 3 more touchdowns or at least 2 more field goals if Boise State had done some things right with a close to 50-plus point blowout here of Nevada. But overall, a very nice effort by Boise State. Like I said, a very balanced effort, and a lot of that was because of just huge individual performances here by Boise State. All season, we've seen some great individual efforts throughout the year by different Boise State players. But I thought today we saw the most, for some of these players, the highlight reel, best plays of the season. The plays that Boise State was making in this game reminded me of the good old days of Boise State. I'm talking the Kellen Moore days, the Jared Zabransky days of Boise State football, just insane college football, top-level highlight reel plays being made today. George Halani had an amazing 49-yard rushing touchdown. You had Stephon Cobbs with a one-handed catch over the top of the defender. He was covered up tight, and he still managed to bring in the grab. And then maybe not to the same level, but you still had some really nice catches by McAllister pulling in a catch between 2 defenders with a guy, his arm all over him, and still being able to get the ball, even though the arm was through his hands, still being able to pull in the grab, and afterwards getting hit by the safety and still being able to pull it in. McAllister having a nice day overall, 2 catches for 70 yards receiving. Even some of the backups. Crow gets in the game, has biggest run of his career, and finishes the game up with 78 yards rushing. So just some amazing performances across the board. Green again showing even more improvement in this game. It's not just in his ability to go out and make plays in the passing game and the running game, but just some of his decision-making points. And the commentators pointed it out. 3rd and goal at the red zone, and everyone's covered up. And instead of trying to force it, which he did do in some points in this game, but in that case, instead of trying to force it and take away points, he threw it out the back of the end zone after staying alive enough in the play to try and make something happen, so there wasn't going to be anything happening, and threw it out the back of the end zone. Just little things like that. Using the snap count to get the defense to jump off sides. There were at least 2 or 3 free plays that Boise State got to just throw the ball up. I believe the pass to Cobbs was one of those kind of just jump ball situations. Now, I did make some mistakes. Like I said, there was several times that maybe some better conditions would have ended up in picks. Nevada had a couple of passes bounce off of their hands. I'd say at least 2 near picks here by Green in better conditions, maybe better defense, but at least better conditions would probably have ended up being potentially interceptions. But overall, a very nice effort here by Green as he continues to develop 11 out of 22, 218 yards passing and a touchdown, and then adding 2 rushes on the ground for 22 yards and a score. Boise State also reaching deep into their bench here in this game offensively, even defensively, but definitely offensively. You saw 4 quarterbacks on the field for Boise State today. We got to see the true freshman Madsen on the field today. He looked pretty good overall, especially for his first ever collegiate game. 3 out of 4 for 34 yards. He was bringing Boise State down, had a chance to maybe put it in for a touchdown. We might have even seen our first Madsen touchdown pass, but unfortunately, snap came a little bit earlier than he was expecting, went through his hands, and ended up being a fumble. Boise State ended up pulling him after that and bringing in Vidlak. Now, there's going to be some questions. Some fans out there going, whoa, is Vidlak now the third string? Is Maddox our second string quarterback? No. I mean, I don't have that from Avalos' mouth, but I think if you were to ask him, if you were to talk to him, he would say, no, this is not the case. But what Boise State's trying to do is Vidlak's gotten game time experience. Boise State knows what Vidlak brings to the table. They've used him in real reps. I mean, he versus San Diego State, he played pretty much the entire second quarter there. So Boise State's seen what Vidlak's able to do. He's clearly the second string quarterback. He's the transfer of Oregon State. He's experienced. He has a good arm. If something happens to Green, the offense would change a little bit, but he'd be able to keep us going. What Boise State's doing is they're giving Madsen real reps. They're giving him actual chance to come up against a defense when there's still plenty of time left. I mean, they put him in the third quarter. That shows you how dominant Boise State was in this game. They were able to put in their third string quarterback in the third quarter and get him some meaningful reps. So when the game wasn't on the line, but the defense was still playing and there was still a chance for Boise State to come in with some meaningful time and make some actual, real game time decision making here. So that's what Boise State was doing. After Madsen had the fumble, they pulled him. I would have rather have let him come back in. I know they were trying to give some other quarterbacks a chance, and that was probably the decision point. It was on that drive. He was going to come out either way. After that, I would rather if he came back in, so he's not dwelling on that. So he doesn't, he had a really nice performance up to that. And unfortunately, he wasn't the only player to fumble. We'll talk about that when we get to special teams. He wasn't the only player to fumble in this one. I would have rather that he had stayed in the game, came back for at least another drive, a couple of plays, get the field of ball in his hands on the field before being pulled. But Boise State pulling him after that. Vidlak came in, and then after Vidlak, we also got to see Fulton for a couple of plays. He got a run in, and then he was able to do the kneel downs for Boise State. So 4 quarterbacks in this game. Like I said, Boise State reaching back into Crow, getting a really nice opportunity in the second half. Genty playing well in the first half as well. I will say for Boise State in this one, a little bit disappointed, like I was last week, in the minimal numbers for Genty. He's kind of starting to trail off. I don't like that. And again, I don't know if that has anything to do with what happened versus Air Force with the injury that he suffered versus Air Force. I don't know if they have on a limited snap count. I don't know if they're preserving him, but I really don't like it. I like to see Genty in there. Helani being your number one guy, obviously. Helani was running insanely hard today. I almost, when you talk about Boise State backs, you talk about comparisons, you always have backs when you are comparing a player, you reach back into your bag of Boise State running backs and you say, okay, this guy is Doug Martin-esque, this guy is Jay Ajayi-esque, this guy is Ian Johnson-esque. And those kind of your 3 main ones. Maybe you've got maybe a dual purpose guy, you might say he's McNichols-esque. I think we need to have a separate category here for Helani-esque back, because there is just something special and different about Helani that he's not really like any of the running backs that I just mentioned. Maybe close to McNichols, but I think he even brings something extra to the field that's different than what McNichols presented. So Helani today, that 49-yard rushing touchdown was the best rushing touchdown I've seen of his career, and not just this season, but I think of his career. It was an incredible job of putting on speed, putting on moves, and then at the end being able to fight through contact. The trifecta there to get into the end zone. So Helani's your number one guy. I'm not arguing that, but Genty brings something different. Whereas Helani brings, the shiftiness and the power. Genty brings some straight line speed and power of his own. You talk about a guy who you can compare directly. Genty for me is Doug Martin 2.0. He is Doug Martin-esque. I want to see him more on the field. 8 carries for 73 yards. He touched the ball 8 times. He has 73 yards. I think having him in the game more, not a straight up rotation system, but spelling along a little bit more, getting him in a little bit more situation, I think you would continue to see Boise State increasing their offensive production as you did when he was playing heavily against Fresno State, for instance, and early on. So I like to see that. I don't like to see him kind of dropping back, but I do like to see him having a productive game. I love seeing Tyler Crow having a great game offensively. We'll move on to defense here in a second, but I love seeing Tyler Crow having a great game. He's always been a guy that I've rooted for, walk-on, former walk-on in scholarship now, but former walk-on comes onto the program, really kind of chisels out a little niche for himself, just as a special teamer. They're using him as a fullback now, and now he's getting a chance to come in here and have some real chance to get some reps in, and he takes full advantage of it. He's always kind of a little bit more like a Van Buren-esque, if we're going to kind of compare people to a player last year. He kind of reminds me a little bit of Van Buren, a little bit more of a power back. He's not usually going to break off big yards. He did that today, but he's going to be able to come in there and fight for those extra couple of yards, fourth down conversion on that last drive or second to last drive for Boise State. So I love seeing what I saw out of the offense overall. Not going to give it an A+ just because of those red zone issues that Boise State had, but overall, fantastic effort by this Boise State offense. I thought it was a restoration of the Boise State offenses of old, especially with that balanced attack. 261, 267, you don't get more balanced than that when you've got your passing and your rushing, both 250 plus and right next to each other. Outstanding effort by this offense. So a solid A effort, A+ if they've been able to punch a couple more of those field goal attempts in for touchdowns instead. So give that a solid A. Defense. Now, this was a shorthanded defense coming into this. Missing a lot of guys up front. Obviously, George Charles is already out. We knew that one coming in. But then Noah and Dimitri Washington both out in this one. Noah, not a guy that I was tracking, was going to be out. He was one of my key players for this matchup, and he's out in this one. And then during the game, Boise State was hit by the injury bug. Tyreek Jones going out, and then his backup Zion Washington also going out in this one. Gabe Hunter looked like he took a little bit of an injury in the arm shoulder area. He seemed to be in a lot of pain. The announcers said that he was able to go back in. I didn't see him go back in after that, but I might have just missed him. Either way, Boise State taking a lot of injuries in this one. Obviously, major injury to the defensive player there for Utah State, and absolute prayers with him. Like I said on Twitter, this is a rivalry game, but at the end of the day, it's just a game. These players, their lives and their careers mean more than anything that this game could. And so absolutely praying that he is able to recover and that his future remains bright. But definitely a tough game in the cold and the snow. Definitely hard conditions and a rivalry game. So both teams are trying to put their best effort on the field. Definitely Boise State doing that this game. Definitely saw a lot of guys going down with injuries, and none of them looked malicious. It just looked like the conditions were causing that, and that's a concern. You got Wyoming and Utah State coming up. Both of those teams can present some challenges for you, especially when you are playing at their stadiums. And when you're having to play in the bad weather conditions as well. So Boise State has got some things that, obviously Utah State's going to be home for Boise State, but Wyoming is definitely going to be tough. Has a tough place, always has been, to go up and play in the snow, and there's definitely going to be snow up there. So you got guys, when you've got injuries already, that is going to be something to think about. But this defense overall had a really nice game if we look past the injuries, and hopefully that doesn't hurt Boise State going forward in the rest of the season. But overall had a really, really nice game. 3 points allowed. What can you say about that? 3 points allowed, only 250 yards overall, 123 passing yards, 127 yards rushing. So balanced game here by Nevada as well, but obviously not as productive as Boise State. 250 yards overall for Nevada, 123 passing, 127 rushing. A better job, much better job of getting the quarterback in this one, at least applying pressure. Boise State putting the 4-man rush look versus the 3-man concept that they were using a lot versus BYU. That was not effective. Boise State pretty much a couple times still not being able to get through, and I think that's just a line that has struggled to get through the quarterback all year. But for the most part, when they had 4 guys going after the quarterback, they were able to apply pressure. 4 sacks in this game, 3 quarterback hurries, and definitely a lot of times where the quarterback was forced out of the pocket, forced to adapt and make some plays on the run. And the secondary overall doing a better job of coming up with stops in this one. Still a couple of deep throws allowed. Those openings that BYU exploited, that Oregon State exploited, that teams with good quarterbacks are able to exploit are still there. But Boise State limiting those a little bit by the fact that their rush was effective. if you look at the plays that Boise State was able to get sacks on almost every single one of them, Obucherry was in on not either on the play necessarily, but influencing the play. You had Matlock coming in, had a big day today. Well, a big part of that was because they were having to focus on Obucherry. Matlock then gets one-on-one, and he's going to make that every day. He comes through, and he's able to go get the sack. Even on the last sack, where I think it was the one that Gabe Hunter ended up getting hurt on, where he was in on that sack, Gabe Hunter was, Obucherry again just completely collapsing that right side of the line, allowing the other blitzers to get through to the quarterback. So I called for it last game. We didn't see it last game. I called for it in my preview video, and we saw it in this game. Obucherry being a presence there on the defensive line, and he was, the combination of Obucherry and Matlock is lethal. You can maybe double team and block one of those guys, but there is no way you're going to be able to block both of them. Boise State doing an outstanding job today of actually using the right play calls and also using the right playmakers, which is, we'll talk about that when we get to my keys to the game here at the end. Those were huge emphasis items for me in this one, and Boise State doing both of those successfully. Just had a great game overall. A couple of forced fumbles by Boise State in the second half. One forced fumble by the backups, which was huge. Boise State coming up big, playing with a lot of energy for most part. Kind of that last drive of the second half of the first half, when Nevada were able to go down and get the field goal, kind of Boise State seemed to maybe take a little bit of an edge off on that one, but refocused after halftime, came out and again shut Nevada down in the second half. So overall, by this defensive effort, a really nice effort. Again, really like seeing Obucherry out there. The backups who came in and played really, really well for Boise State with the loss of Noah and Dimitri Washington there. I liked what I saw overall by this defense. I'm gonna give him an A+. I'm gonna give him an A+. Obviously the broken plays on a couple of those deep passes definitely need to be corrected. But if you can keep a team to under 3 points, hold them to 250 yards or less overall, and make a big step forward on what was an emphasis item for you the week before, that being the not getting to the quarterback effectively, you're going to get a pretty good score in my book. So it's a near A+. I mean, it's really, really kind of razor thin there, but overall outstanding effort here by the defense. Now, special teams, this one is a tough one to grade, okay? Because on the one hand, you had some really nice plays in the coverage team. You had Dalmez coming down and making a tackle. That's not necessarily a nice play for the coverage unit, because the coverage unit had to allow their kicker to make the tackle. But I love seeing kickers getting in on the action. I love it when a kicker will get his hands dirty and go down there and make a big play, and he did. He went down and stopped what would have been a much bigger return. But Boise State did have a blocked kick in this game, which was another big part of this team presenting that kind of classic dominant Boise State look in this matchup. And then Capel's coming down with some good awareness on 2 plays. One, when I don't know if he made the Peter call, but either way, LaBeouf pushed in, or Oladipo, I'm not sure which player, actually, now I'm thinking about it in my mind, and I don't have it written down. But one of the players that was on the coverage team got pushed into the ball by the defense after Capels had decided not to touch it, and he made the smart call, saw that, dived in, and got the recovery. So really kind of a nice heads-up play by him there to prevent a turnover. And then he had a really nice play, because this ball was hard to catch. I mean, it was slippery, there was snow, it was hard to get in position footwork-wise to even be able to make the catch on these returns, but he was able to put himself in a position where he was able to run up and make a catch and then return a 26-yard return, which is one of the longer punt returns Boise State has had so far this season. I mean, they really haven't had the same success that they had definitely 2 years ago when you had Avery Williams, but even last year haven't necessarily seen that production out of Boise State on the punt return, but they did today, and they, or at least on this one play, put Boise State up inside of the 30-yard line for their first drive of the second half. So those were some really nice plays. And also Ferguson had a 61-yard punt that went into the end zone because the coverage team didn't know where it was going. He kind of kicked beyond where they expected it to land, ended up rolling about 15 yards into the end zone. So that was unfortunate. But again, I love seeing Ferguson getting that leg on there, because we haven't seen him really getting that distance on his kick. Well, we did today. So it's kind of one of those up and downs. Now, the downside of this is that Boise State had 2 mishandled snaps on field goals that caused them to be unsuccessful in kicking 2 field goals in this game, both on the long snapper there. So Boise State really having trouble getting the on the snapper and on the holder on that, like kind of a combination of both of those, I would think. Either way, Boise State having trouble getting the ball down twice. Dalma's, I believe, recovering both of those missed kicks or mishandled snaps. But they figured it out in the second half when the snow stopped. 2 of 2 in the second half for a 35-yard long. But that's really going to kind of knock the grade down. But it's also going to cause Boise State fans and the coaching staff to maybe have a little bit of concern when you go up and play Wyoming. And even when Utah State comes, I mean, if you've got that snow, this was a huge issue trying to handle those snaps correctly. You start thinking, well, we've got the best kicker in the Mountain West. But if the weather conditions are there, because he's got to be able to have a ball to kick, Boise State might start thinking, well, maybe now instead of setting up for field goals, we start looking at them as 4-down opportunities and saying we've got to be able to put this in the end zone, which then again plays into Boise State's red zone issues overall and their struggles to convert in touchdowns. So something to keep an eye on going forward for sure. I'm sure that's going to be an emphasis point. I'm not really sure how you duplicate this without snow. I mean, maybe you ice the ball up or something, and then you practice catching a freezing cold ball. I'm not sure exactly how you would duplicate this. I might have to call Tyler Rassa and ask him how he would duplicate this and how they might practice it. But overall, it's going to be something that Boise State's going to need to address because they are definitely going to face this situation again over the next couple of throughout the rest of the season and the next couple of games. So overall, special teams performance, I really want to give it a good grade because I loved what I saw in the return game, but those 2 muff kicks are really, really bad. So I'm going to give it a C+ overall, even though I liked some of the individual effort that I saw on the special teams. All right, so just to wrap up here real quick, so that's an A for offense, A+, so A for offense, A+ for defense, and a C+ for special teams. Just to wrap up here real quick at the end, how did Boise State do with my keys to the game? Well, my number one key was get Green's legs back in the game. And early on in the first half, they did this, and I think if Boise State had been down in the game and had to use him more, they would have. But they used him effectively. He was 2 carries for 22 yards and a touchdown. And the touchdown was, a perfect draw play where he just outran the DN who actually had a line on him, and Boise State had ran it up the middle a bunch of times. The DN was kind of alone trying to stop him, and he was able to run around and get it in for a touchdown. And he was also able to do something similar for a first down. So Green's legs are definitely a factor. Wasn't necessarily the emphasis item in this game because it didn't have to be because Boise State jumped off into such a huge lead. And once you got that lead, you don't need to start putting your quarterback at risk. So I'm going to give this an A because I think that Boise State did address it in concept. They were definitely using his legs early on, first couple of drives, and then they jumped out to that huge 21-0 lead early. And it was clear. The announcers, after Helani broke that 49-yard touchdown run, the announcers, still in the first half at 21-0, Boise State has lost at 21-0, but the announcers basically said the game was over at that point. They said Boise State's going to be improving to 5-0 whenever they're able to have a 40-plus yard rush or whatever they said this stat was. One of those, kind of obscure stats that they pull out of thin air. But whatever the stat was, Boise State's 5-0 whenever that rushing stat is done. And or 4-0 previously, and now they were saying they're going to improve it to 5-0. And again, it was only 21-0 in the first half, and they were already declaring the game over. So I think the coaching staff was kind of thinking in the same mindset. We don't need to risk our quarterback, but they were definitely willing to early on, and I like that going forward. Second key, reestablish a run-based offense. Definitely a focus in this game, that run-heavy attack. Now, they definitely were taking the air attack into consideration. And again, very balanced offensive attack for Boise State overall in this one. And I think versus Nevada was probably the right call. I think there were opportunities. Versus BYU, not the right call. Balanced attack should not have been what Boise State went with, or at least an air focus on the air should have been a focus on the run. In this game, Boise State, Nevada, very bad defense and opportunities in the passing game that Boise State was able to take advantage of. We'll have to see when we preview Wyoming and Utah State if those type of styles will work versus those teams. However, Boise State definitely had more rushing yards than you did passing yards, and it was definitely a focus in this game to establish that, whether it be through Helani, whether it be through the use of Green's legs or through your combination of your backups. Boise State definitely making them run and a focus in this. So I'm going to give it a B+ because the passing game was definitely a major factor in this one. But again, I think that ended up being the right call in this situation. However, we talked about going forward, Boise State this offensive line, when you go up against a good defensive line, still struggles when you are asking them to pass block on a regular basis. So Boise State still got to be able to keep in their bag of tricks. We're just talking about bag of tricks. I totally forgot to talk about Halani throwing a pass to Taylor Green. That was awesome. Even though it didn't end up working out, got a first down out of it because of the pass interference. So I just want to backtrack on that. But pulling to keep their running game, that heavy offense as an option, depending on what the defense is presenting you. But overall in this game, Boise State doing a good job to reestablish their run focus after a very disappointing rushing effort last week versus BYU. All right, and then third one here is find the quarterback. We talked about it already. Increasing the pressure on the quarterback. We said, how is Boise State going to do this? Well, they can change the plays that they're calling, and they did. I mean, there was a focus on the 4-man rush versus only putting 3 and dropping everyone back in coverage. And then second, I said was playmakers. I said put Obuchari on the field, and they did in this game. So Boise State, A+ effort overall. Probably could have had a few more sacks and wiggle out of a couple, but overall, a fantastic effort to get after the quarterback in this game and increase the pressure through both play calling and through putting the right playmakers on the field. So overall, a great game by Boise State. They have to go and face Wyoming. This is going to be a tough game, as always, especially with the Mountain West Conference Championship basically being on the line. This is going to pretty much determine Utah State really out of the running right now. This is going to determine the Mountain West Championship game. So I believe that's on a Friday. I'm pretty sure. No, the Utah State game's on a Friday. So this is, it's still a Saturday game. So this is going to be a big one. A big-time matchup. I can't wait to preview it. If you haven't already, make sure you like and subscribe. If it's your first time watching one of my videos, I'm usually in my normal studio space. Like I said, I was with my in-laws this week, so a little bit of a different look. And I know everyone hates the vertical camera, and I've stopped using it in general, but just with this look, the vertical camera was a better way to go than the horizontal. So I do apologize for that element. So thanks so much for watching. It's gonna be a little bit of a quieter one because again, I've got people sleeping right next door and it's almost 2 a.m. right now. But thanks so much for watching, and like and subscribe. And as always, go Big Blue.